Welcome to Unit 1, Video 5. We are continuing with ancient river valley civilizations. In this video, we will focus on the ancient river valley civilization of ancient Egypt. So in the same section as your notes from the last video, just make sure you are starting where it says ancient Egypt. The early civilization of ancient Egypt was located in northeastern Africa along the Nile River. If you take a look at the map on the screen, you can see that this whole area here is the northeastern corner of Africa. This blue line going up and down here is the Nile River, which interestingly flows north. So it starts down here and it actually flows north up and flows into the Mediterranean Sea up here, which is pretty unique. You can also see that I have labeled the split here into lower and upper. So because the Nile River flows from south to north, down south it is considered the area of the upper Nile, and then up north it is considered the lower Nile, again because this is where it ends flowing into the Mediterranean Sea. So keep in mind that the southern part is considered the upper Nile and the northern part is considered the lower Nile, opposite of what you would normally think. There's specialized labor or specialization of labor in ancient Egypt, just as we saw it in ancient Mesopotamia. Farmers and merchants will be some of these forms of specialized labor. Farmers are going to focus on obviously growing crops, and there will be very fertile soil along the Nile River, just as we saw fertile soil in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. On the Nile River, there will be something called silt that is deposited or left behind by the river on the land right around the river, and it's going to be very, very good for the ability to farm. And merchants are people who trade goods or sell goods. And merchants in Egypt are going to trade not only with different areas of Egypt, but also with other civilizations. So we will see some trading between civilizations exist. In terms of technology for ancient Egypt, they did build canals and irrigation systems. So again, with the irrigation systems, the ability to get water to the farmland to make sure that the crops do grow. Without crops, you do not have food. Without food, you do not have a civilization. So irrigation systems were very, very important at this point in history. The cities in ancient Egypt are going to include very large pyramids and monuments. These pyramids are probably what you're most familiar with when you think of ancient Egypt today. They are very, very popular in today's culture. And what they were meant to do was honor the pharaohs. A pharaoh was a religious and political leader in ancient Egypt. They were in charge of everything that happened, and they were looked at as if they were gods by the Egyptian people. So they held great importance, and these pyramids were built in their honor after the pharaoh died. In fact, a lot of the times the pyramid would be built during the years that the pharaoh ruled, so that when they died, it would be completed and ready for them to rest in. So pharaohs, as I said, are rulers who were worshipped as gods. They were at the top of society, and while they were at the top of society, slaves are going to be at the lowest part of society. So again, we will see slavery just like we saw in Mesopotamia. And again, just like in Mesopotamia, slavery was not based on race. It was, again, most often based on being caught during wartime and or owing money or owing a debt that you could not repay. In terms of religion, ancient Egypt was polytheistic. Again, polytheistic is a belief in many gods. So just like Mesopotamia was polytheistic, a belief in many gods, so was ancient Egypt. The government was ruled as a theocracy, meaning government ruled by religious leaders. The pharaoh was in charge. The pharaoh was seen as a god, and so therefore considered a religious leader. So ancient Egypt was a theocracy. Some examples of some of the gods that were believed in the ancient Egyptian polytheistic religion are listed here. Ra is the sun god, Horus the god of light, and Isis, fertility goddess. These are just some of the examples. There were more than just those. For writing in ancient Egypt, the writing system was known as hieroglyphics, and hieroglyphics were written by scribes. Educated men, that should say men on the screen, who knew how to write. Individuals would go to school to be a scribe for many, many years. It would take a long time to learn all of the different symbols for writing hieroglyphics. And it was something that was pretty rare. They were decently high on the social hierarchy, where they were in importance in society. Just because it was a hard job. They would write down the things that the pharaoh ordered or that the pharaoh spoke of, and so they were considered quite important. They would write on papyrus. Papyrus is an early form of paper, and it was made from reeds of the Nile River. So this is often what you would see hieroglyphics written on. On the screen now is how Egyptian society was ordered. At the very top of Egyptian society would be the pharaoh. Again, the pharaoh was the political and religious leader, seen to be like a god, or the equivalent of a god. Right under the pharaoh is the vizier. The vizier is the advisor to the pharaoh. Under that, you see nobles and priests. Priests are religious leaders, and nobles are the higher class. Under that, you see scribes and soldiers. Like I said earlier, scribes are fairly high because their job it takes a lot of schooling, and there aren't a whole lot of them. And then soldiers would also be found on the same level. Below that, we see craftsmen. Craftsmen are individuals who work with their hands, so creating pottery, things like that. And then at the very bottom, interestingly, we see slaves on the same level as farmers. So again, just like in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, slavery is not based on race. Slaves do exist, and farmers are actually on the bottom of society along with slaves, which is interesting because farming is something that is essential for the survival of civilizations, and yet at this point in history, they were seen as pretty low on the social hierarchy, the social system. This ends your section of notes on ancient Egypt.